and welcome to the panel discussion in the webinar series Namma Permanent Address, a joint initiative of CREDAI Bengaluru representing the collective unified voice of the real estate industry and the Times of India, India's most read English daily. Today we will discuss how the real estate policies will impact your purchase. I'm Suchetna Ray, Senior Assistant Editor of the Economic Times, and I am your moderator for this session. The topic at hand today is how real estate policies will impact purchase, especially in the home buyer segment. And let's do a quick round of introductions. Join me in welcoming Dr. Venkatesh Panchapagesan, Chairperson, Real Estate Research Initiative, IIM Bangalore, Associate Professor, Finance and Accounting, Entrepreneurship, Secondary Member, Chairperson, NSR CEL. I also have with me today Mr. A. Balakrishna Hegde, Advisor, CREDAI Karnataka, and EC Member, CREDAI National, Past President, CREDAI Karnataka, Managing Director, Chartered Housing Private Limited. We also have with us Mr. Amar Mysore, GB Member, CREDAI Bengaluru, Executive Director, Brigade Enterprises Limited. Also joining us today, Mr. Bhaskar T. Nagendrappa, President-elect, CREDAI Bengaluru, Joint Managing Director, Habitat Ventures. Thank you to all of you for taking the time out to join me today for this discussion. Before we dive into the discussion, I'll just take a few short minutes to set the context for today's discussion. Real estate, as we know it, is second only to agriculture in terms of employment generation in the country. It contributes as much as 8% to the nation's GDP. By 2025, data shows the real estate sector is anticipated to account for as much as 13% of the country's GDP. The impact of COVID looms large on every aspect of life and business. As per the Knight Frank Ficke Narrative Real Estate Sentiment Index, for Q4 2020, which is the period of October to December 2020, this was a survey, real estate sentiment scored an annual high. And we hope that the scenario in 2021 is also going to be that optimistic. According to an ANAROCK survey, which I happened to chance upon, housing sales in top 7 cities surged 29% year on year in the first 3 months of 2021, breaching pre-COVID levels. However, Bangalore was perhaps the only city that I saw in that survey in the top 7 to not record a major yearly change in total sales number for this quarter. Experts suggest that the government needs to take more quick and bold corrective measures for the housing and urban infrastructure sector, which will go a long way in supporting and playing a crucial role in boosting demand as well as helping developers. Data shows an upswing in NRI investment in India in FY21, and this pace will continue this fiscal as well, people say. And another trend has been that the luxury housing is seeing growth. So positivity all around, and hopefully it's going to be a trend that we will see. Budget 2021, if we talk about the union budget, we saw that for real estate sector, there were certain benefits that were announced, benefits such as tax benefits for affordable housing and for private investment formats, such as rights and infrastructure investment trust. The finance minister also extended the tax exemption benefit as well as deduction of interest on loans for another year till March 2022 for the affordable housing category. Another noteworthy move, perhaps, that will provide succor to the low-income group is this tax exemption, making real estate and making homes more accessible to the lower stratas of the society. Let's dive straight into the discussion now. And I will begin with a question which is for all of you to answer. So don't wait for me to come to you with an answer. Please participate in this discussion. Like, as we say in Bengali, it was an adda, where we talk to each other. My first question is that, data shows both in terms of housing sales and new launches that Bengaluru is perhaps a little bit of a laggard. So my question to Mr. Panchapagesan, I'll begin with you, is that what are the government policies that could be adopted to boost residential demand in Bangalore and Karnataka?
Thank you, Suchetna, and I'm glad to be part of this panel. I think the first thing to realize is, as being in academics, especially when we are all bombarded with rankings of various management schools, we don't go by quarter ranking. So we have to look at the fundamentals of what we offer and whether they are solid to be able to sustain the growth over a longer term. So the context, by the analogy for that in this current context is I don't think I will read too much into what has happened in the first quarter for Bangalore, whether it's a laggard or not. I think Bangalore market is an end user market, right? Largely not an investor driven market like what you see in the north or the west. So to that extent, I would say this is the kind of market that we should have in the country, where the consumers who are eventually going to occupy the houses are the ones who are determining the value of the house in that market, as opposed to people who are thinking of turning it around. So in that respect, I think Bangalore has shown in the past that it has been a solid performer in terms of in development as well as in being able to deliver these houses on time and so on. So I think in that respect, I would not worry too much about this quarter. But to answer to your other question about what the government can do, see, I always feel that governments should act as in terms of policies, especially the policies which are not easy to pass or a little bit controversial. They should do when times are really good, because that's the time when you don't have too many people opposing you. So when you wait for things to turn really bad, that's the time when the government hands are also very much tied down, right? Because for example, the time when things are, let's say there are no sales, the government tax revenues have gone down dramatically. So at that time, if you tell them to lower tax, let's say stamp duties or those things, the government will be thinking twice. But having said that, I think right now for us, that is the need for the hour, because I feel real estate is one sector which carries the economy. So I think in that, and I think is globally that has been the case, right? Most governments, whenever they try to come out of recession, the first sector that they actively participate to push it up is the real estate and housing. I mean, whether you take the developed countries or the less developed countries, housing is being the forefront of any sort of recovery from recession. So in that respect, I think the government, if by bringing the growth in the real estate sector, can actually help in boosting the larger economic growth. And I think the way to do that right now is as we saw, I think in the Maharashtra case, lowering stamp duty has a positive impact. I mean, we have not done full-scale research to know how much of it can be attributed to the stamp duty reduction. But I can tell you from our past work in Karnataka, where we had done some research on stamp duty reduction as well as guidance value reduction, what actually promotes transactions. We find that both of them have a positive impact on people coming forward to registering and coming forward to buying. So the increase in number of transactions happens in both cases, but more so when you lower guidance value. So I'm assuming that in this current scenario, lowering guidance value may not be appetizing to the government.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if the government lowers stamp duty, we have also shown that many of these times it could be revenue neutral for the government, in the sense that they lower duty right now. It looks like they have lost some revenue, but the fact that there are more transactions that are coming to be registered and more activity that is picking up, the government can more than sufficiently compensate or recover the lost revenues. So I think I'm going by the fact that the government policy should not be focused on real estate alone, but more as real estate as an engine to the economic growth, the larger economic.
A question to Mr. Hegde. Mr. Panchapagesan has been talking about the stamp duty. We saw a reduction in Karnataka from 5 to 3% in last year. Do you think that has had the desired result? A. B. As Mr. Panchapagesan is saying, that real estate has to be looked at as an engine of growth. So in that context, what do you think are the top 3 things that the sector needs right now as far as policy interventions are concerned?
Coming to the stamp duty question, yes, in Karnataka, they have brought down the stamp duty to 3% up to 45 lakh, between 35 and 45 lakh. But it is so far, we are not talking on the ground reality or the statistics as of now, because the reduction has been done only recently and effective from 1st of April. We do not know. But my point is, why not 3% or 2% across the board? Why limit it to only 45? See, 45 lakhs, they have put that limit thinking that that is the affordable segment limit. But the affordable segment itself is not 45. Come to Bangalore. It is 45 is not the affordable segment. Right up to 60, 65, if you go to, that may be the affordable segment. Because Bangalore market is different. If you go to Mumbai, even 65 is not affordable. There is no point restricting it. You better restrict it to the area rather than the value. So much area. They have 60 meters, 60 square meters, 90 square meters, 120 square meters. So do not talk about the limit on the cap on the value of the flat. It is better to limit a cap on the size of the flat, and that too, it can't be uniform. In Bangalore, if you ask me, 660 square feet is very, very small. In Mumbai, 60 square meters may be a good size.
Good size, yes.
Yes, and Delhi may be similar to Mumbai. And any policy changes, just tinkering has never helped the government. Just for the sake of changing a rate, you change it, that's of no use. In Maharashtra, they have changed it to 2%, from 5 to 2% across the board. And the government see the revenue jump phenomenal. Phenomenal is the revenue jump that they've seen. Only when you make some bold changes in the policies that you see results, small tinkering, interest rate reduction, exemption from 150,000 to 175,000. These things don't work at all. It should be drastic. It should be bold. It should be impactful.
Just to add to Mr. Hegde's point, I think governments should do some sort of a root cause analysis, right? In the sense, what is the root cause for this not taking off? Or like in the example that he gave, that 45 lakhs. Do we know what number of transactions happens in 45 lakh range? What is the velocity in that area? How much will it be impacted if you remove the tax? So I don't think they are doing any background work or research before putting these policies out. I think these policies are more ad hoc to satisfy some clientele. But at the end of the day, in order to be impactful, you need to be making sure that it will work. And I agree totally with Mr. Hegde on this.
I have a figure. Private developers, it's about 20% of their stock is an affordable segment because of this cap.
Yeah.
And I would like to add to what Mr. Hegde and Professor Venkatesh are saying. Basically, just like they pointed out, it's a little too less in this time frame. And also we have to remember that to construct the 45 lakh homes, which is only 20% of some of the developers' inventory, it takes about 2 years, 2.5, 3 years to get that going, which forms that time when they can register. So whatever SOP that the state budget has announced from 5% to 3% for the 35 to 45 lakhs range is only going to kick in when the apartment is ready for the buyer to come and register. So that is at least a 1 year to 3 year time frame from the time the supply is created. So I think that's where there's a huge disconnect. And like Professor mentioned, we need the root cause analysis to be done and have the policies that really give an effect. And like he said, real estate is a huge multiplier effect. And once the money comes in, money coming in today is a lot more worth than coming in maybe 6 months later for the government. So a lot of fence sitters would just go and register to avail this benefit if it were to be given to all price ranges, not capping it to between 35 to 45 lakhs.
Coming to policy decisions by the government, 1998 Habitat Policy had suggested that the state governments should bring down the stamp duty to reasonable levels maybe up to 3%. At that time, the ruling rate across the country was between 10 to 12%. And of course, it has gradually come down to around 5% now, but back door, there is something else happening. Guidance value, or in some parts of the country, they call it circle value, circle rates. They have constantly raised the circle rates. In effect, the impact or the benefit of reduction in stamp duty has not been felt by the buyer. In 1998, if the buyer was paying X percentage of his purchase as stamp duty, today also he's paying the same percentage. This is one thing where government does something on one hand, takes it away on the other hand. That doesn't help. Number one. Number two, 1% GST for affordable housing.
Yes.
In fact, it is only eyeball. There is nothing. I am paying on my product 18% GST. On top of it, the buyer is paying 1% because it is not deductible. It is not, I don't get the rebate on the input tax. There is no input tax rebate for affordable housing, which is charged at 1%. If I had got the input tax rebate, the product value itself would have come down. Right now, the product suffers a GST of 18%, then it suffers another 1% of GST. It is a double whammy. So these kind of policies don't help. See, it is against the basic concept of GST. The concept of GST is that whatever that has been paid has to be deducted at the end, the final point. This doesn't happen here. So there is no benefit at all. Such policies from the government is not at all used.
Yeah, I'll go to Mr. Nagendrappa with the same question, which is what do you think, if you were asked the top 3 policy interventions that the government has to do to boost this sector immediately? As the other panelists have been mentioning, and we all are very aware of the fact, the impact that growth in real estate has because of its multiplier effect on the economy overall.
Yes, good evening and thank you. Everybody, majority of them have told about what is the impact or what is the contribution of the real estate to the sector, to the overall economy or the GDP and things like that. But coming down to the end user, in Bangalore, like Professor also said, as Mr. Venki said, that majority, predominantly Bangalore is an end user driven market. So ultimately, whether it is current or the future prospective, home buyer, the expectation is they want the best at the lowest. Okay. And when I say lowest, a reasonable value for money, whatever. So now with the scenario where, things have gone up, whether it is material, whether it is labor, subsequently even government also coming out with a hike in fees and things like that, and trying to reduce some nominal stamp duty, as my other speakers were telling, the affordable housing definition doesn't, apply because the lifestyle itself is totally different. Unlike in Bombay or in other Chennai or in Calcutta, where in which there is the suburban rail system, where in which the housing is at the suburb, they commute and things like that. Apart from that, the variation of lifestyle in Bangalore is not hugely different. It's, you can compare, the lifestyle is almost, same or there. They do not compromise. So the 45 doesn't, fit in. Now coming to this thing, if at all, if they have to do, they will have to come out with a policies which are clear in their thoughts. Now, for example, now every time, the change is a constant phenomena, and the CDP, whatever we do, the policies are, not clear. And now, for example, even in our own NGT matter, which was applicable only for Bangalore city, which predominantly majority of the, developers suffered to a large extent. And the vision document, the so-called comprehensive development plan, which is the vision, is based on outdated revenue maps.
Right.
Okay. So whereas being the capital of the IT for the country, we should have been following on the geo satellite images. The base map should have been the geo satellite images, not the outdated, the revenue maps. Likewise, I mean, there are areas where in which, I mean, how best, I mean, even you have to boost the confidence on the, like on the TDR. One government is given a certificate, it's of no value. The other departments are not even, valuing that.
Yes.
So there has to be some kind of credibility or some kind of, weightage for the government, documents or government papers also. Okay,
Yeah.
so be it CDP, I mean, they're like, Bangalore is even branded, I mean, historically as, traffic jam city.
Yes.
Now, I mean, if you're going with that kind of this thing, so you also be liberal and you are spending so much of money on the infrastructure, be it metro or whatever. So along the metro, at least you should reduce the car parking requirement and encourage the usage of metro. The policies have to be very friendly so that even the costing also comes and the commuting also reduces. And I mean, last but not the least, I mean, when we have been last 1 year, 1.5 years, we've been talking about ease of doing business. And
Right.
ease of doing business is just not introduction of system and taking some software and things like that. I mean, it cannot be one window with multiple doors. Even you have to reduce the number of tables also. When I mean, it has to be less human interface. So I mean, basically, overall, I mean, there is a lot of things actually where in which they can make, keeping in mind the home buyer as a, not as a developer, because developer, I mean, as such, I mean, they have their own thinking. Now, honestly, to tell you, as a developer also, we have moved from being unorganized to organized in a very short span of time.
Yes, of
Very
course.
short span of time.
Yes.
I mean, the credibility or the confidence on the of the home buyers on the developer, at least in Bangalore city, is high. I can probably say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Policy changes that are done midway actually spoils the entire feasibility for developers, because developers, like in the case of affordable housing, they first said 60 square meter is the affordable housing category, the definition. Then people actually, it's part of the Housing for All PM's vision to bring 2 crore houses or something like that by 2022 or 2023. So if that has to be done, then there has to be consistency in policies. They
Right.
can't come back and change in a year, saying that it has to also meet not just 60 square meter area, but it also has the criteria of 45 lakhs. That to me is just is not done, because it just developers have done the concepts, they've brought it to the market after 1 year or 1.5 years of planning and getting all the approvals, and now in one fell swoop they change the entire thing, and it's not possible to do course correction for developers, and you just have to stick with it and go with it. I mean, unless you revisit the drawing board, but by then you would have borrowed so much money that the clock is ticking on the interest. So it's important that these kind of policy shifts are not done. They can make it beyond that 5-year timeline which was given for affordable housing to complete. So these kind of things have to be be cognizant when they make some changes of this sort.
Right, Mr. Mysore, I'll take that question to Mr. Panchapagesan. The point that all of you have been raising is the lack of consistency when it comes to policy making. That is something, Mr. Panchapagesan, that ails not only the real estate sector, but most business sectors, most economic sectors in India. One is lack of policy consistency. There's a lot of policy flip-flop we see. The other is that because of a lot of judicial activism that we've seen in the past, I mean, just imagine the number of cases that are stuck at the Supreme Court when it comes to home buyers and developers. There has perhaps been instilled an inherent distrust between developers and home buyers, when it shouldn't have been the case. How do you think we can overcome both these issues?
See, I think, let me just first address the point on the government flip-flopping often.
Yeah.
I don't know why we do that. It's not a bizarre thing that only government of India does it, or because the retrospective moves, changing the goalpost in the middle of the game, and even in some cases make the rules so vague, then they can conveniently interpret. So all of this, I mean, I do not know what is the motive. I mean, the only motive could be that somebody wants a control, and they want to change as things change without really thinking about the long-term damage. And I think in that respect, I find the real estate sector is probably the only few, I mean, I would say one of the few sectors that have been subject to a regulation where the sector is now beholden to their own promises, right? I mean, the RERA is all about, what you promise is what you should deliver. And for some reason, we don't have the government in the RERA. And I think we should, that is probably the starting point, So if the government makes promises to either the industry or to the buyers or to the broader sector, they should be beholden to this and somewhat made accountable. And I think that accountability in the public domain is hugely missing in India. And unlike in other countries where, the citizens will take up the issue in a big way, if governments flip-flop continuously, somehow, our citizens are not so active about putting the government on the dock. So coming to your second question on the mistrust, I think that has been the bane of this sector, right? I mean, I think the whole point of even bringing something like RERA in was predicated on the premise that there is a huge distrust between the thing. And that I think is coming from Mr. Nagendrapa's earlier observation that, the sector had been largely unorganized. So which means anybody could come in, accumulate a little bit of land, develop something, make a quick buck, is not beholden to any liability 2 or 3 years after they sell, even if the house collapses, they may not be even traceable. I think all of those things have been changing. I think as you saw from the time RERA has been passed, there is a consolidation in the industry. There is a lot of professionalization in the industry. All of these are good signs for the sector. But what I would suggest, especially to organizations like CREDAI or NAREDCO, that they should really make this as a branding issue. So in the sense, I mean, if you think about it, I think even today, CREDAI would not, I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I would assume maybe 30-40% of the developers are part of a formal organization like CREDAI or NAREDCO across the country. So clearly they are not 100% of all the developers, unlike in other sectors. So I think we should either, I mean, I don't know whether you can actually incentivize somebody who wants to be making a fast buck, who wants to try to make a fast buck to bring them into CREDAI. But what CREDAI can do is to separate themselves from the rest of them by creating a value product and holding their members accountable. So that at least, all the stories that you get from people, buyers having, bad experiences, they should not come from CREDAI developers. So to that extent, if that happens, then CREDAI can charge a premium, So customers, the market will automatically price it. And therefore, you don't have to then worry about customers, not coming to your or trusting you and so on, because then that natural thing will get built. So but right now I'm feeling that, the CREDAI does a lot of talking, but they need to also walk the walk in putting some of their members who are violating some norms, which are known norms, in the dock.
To pitch in here, RERA came in the year 2016 and CREDAI in the year 1998, especially CREDAI Karnataka, has brought out a code of conduct for the members, which lists out all the do's and don'ts which have come in the form of RERA today. We have done it long, long back. And that is a time when in Bangalore, even today, even before the RERA came, quite a few of the buyers first check whether the particular developer is a CREDAI member or not. We have built a credible organization in CREDAI and for its members through the code of conduct. And it contains most of the RERA clauses. RERA may have a few more clauses, but we have most important for the member, for the purchaser, we had already taken care of it. But RERA came, RERA is fine. Of course, there are certain things which need to be ironed out. That will not talk today. I don't think that's a subject for today. RERA came, but before RERA, you're talking about policy. You're talking about engine of growth. Real estate is, of course, the engine of growth. even a pan bida shop to a multinational company. Everyone wants a real estate. Without real estate in this country or across the world, no business can start. Can you start a business without real estate? When do we realize that real estate is the core of economy? And this particular industry does not get the proper support. Forget about support. I'm not looking at policies. Professor Venki, forget about policies from government. Declutter the policies of today. One policy talks about something, you go to another department, there is a counter condition there. And to get one sanction today, Suchetna, I have to move 42 tables.
Right. Absolutely.
42 tables. Why should I do that? Am I a criminal? Am I a smuggler? Why so many checks on me? If you don't understand that real estate is the engine of growth, the economy itself will suffer. For everything, real estate is required.
So I'll come back to my question that I started with, Mr. Hegde. I'll ask the question to Mr. Hegde, you, to Mr. Nagendrappa, to Mr. Mysore. The question that I started with, I think at the core of it is distrust, a distrust that has been festering, and a distrust which continues to fester. How can we get rid of that? How can you address that?
That's what I told you. We have addressed it not today. We've been addressing it from 1998. Of course, still there may be black sheep here and there. I mean, which industry does not have? Real estate also has. But to a great extent, we have a grievance cell in CREDAI. Suppose you buy an apartment and you find something wrong. You can come to CREDAI. You don't have to go to the court. You don't have to spend your money. You don't have to spend your time. You come to CREDAI, and 99% of the cases that have come to CREDAI, Nagendrappa will vouch that they have been resolved amicably to the satisfaction of the client and the builder both. This is
the
how
builder will have to be a CREDAI member for this.
This is how we build credibility over a period of time. Distrust. In Bangalore is not all that bad in terms of image of a developer. We are much, much better than any other city. I'm not putting down any city, but even Professor will agree. Bangalore has a much better reputation. And this is the work that we have done over a period of time. We in CREDAI, for the last 20 to 25 years, we have been working on that. Yeah, we have not reached the goal yet, but we have reached we have covered quite a bit of a distance.
Just to add to that, actually, out of the 10 top developers in the country, whatever survey was conducted a couple of years back, 6 of them were from Bangalore city itself. Okay. And even in the housing sector now, today, if you see, by and large, I mean, the home buyer also is very keen to buy a home from a CREDAI developer only, because they consider this as a credible developers. They call it as a credible CREDAI developer. Okay. So by and large today, I mean, as in the past work, whatever my seniors, including Mr. Balakrishna Hegde and all have done it, we are seeing that fruit today on the ground reality. Today, even today's paper also, like if you see, there is a 5% increase in sale on the positive note. I mean, other people have seen the negative growth. That is purely because of the trust, which is at the higher level compared to other cities. I don't say, I mean, there is no negativity. I mean, there is, I mean, but still, having said, I mean, the positive sentiment for a CREDAI developer today, if at all, if it is there any higher level, that is in Bangalore city or in Karnataka for the first.
It's hard to get into CREDAI. I mean, as a developer, you must have, they evaluate your track record. Anybody applying to become a CREDAI member. So it's not easy. It's not easy. They have to have complied by the rules. They shouldn't have violated in their projects that they have done before. So I think there's a lot of credibility attached to CREDAI. It's just that, unfortunately, there are a lot of fly-by-night operators who have spoiled the name. The builder tag is just associated with something else. But honestly, we are the builders of the nation. I mean, we are providing real estate spaces for people to either live in them or work out of them or dine in them or the malls that you go and shop. All these are provided, and it's a huge, like you said, it's second to agriculture, and it has a huge multiplier effect. It's just that it's unfortunate that it's being branded in a different way when actually it should be probably praised in a different forum, because ultimately 250 and odd industries actually benefit from one construction project. So it's important that that due recognition is given. It's hard to get into CREDAI. I mean, as a developer, you must have, they evaluate your track record. Anybody applying to become a CREDAI member, so it's not easy. It's not easy. They have to have complied by the rules. They shouldn't have violated in their projects that they have done before. So I think there's a lot of credibility attached to CREDAI. It's just that unfortunately there are a lot of fly-by-night operators who have spoiled the name. The builder tag is just associated with something else. But honestly, we are the builders of the nation. I mean, we are providing real estate spaces for people to either live in them or work out of them, or dine in them, or the malls that you go and shop. All these are provided, and it's a huge, like you said, it's second to agriculture, and it has a huge multiplier effect. It's just that it's unfortunate that it's being branded in a different way when actually it should be probably praised in a different forum, because ultimately 250 and odd industries actually benefit from one construction project. So it's important that that due recognition is given.
Just a thought, Mr. Hegde and others. So I think it may be that I think CREDAI, as you said, they're doing a lot of things, but I think the communication of what you do in a strong message to the broader public may be the issue. Is not come through very well, because I think now that we have RERA also, there's so much transparency on the number of projects, number of cases against different builders within RERA. So we should be able to project that here is an organization, that members of this organization follow a certain code of conduct, which is aligned with the interest of the customers, the buyers. And therefore, if you are going to select a project for your house, you should consider a CREDAI project house, and this is the why. And then you make a very strong case. And I think that will, because I also feel the same way that the problem is that people are not able to distinguish between the good apples and the bad apples, right? And then they are painting everybody with the same brush, and I think that is hurting the good developers. Unfortunately, so and the RERA is pushing everybody to follow certain code and certain compliance norms. There is one push from RERA, and there's another push from the investors, right? You have people like Blackstones, people who are foreign institutional investors who have very high code of conduct, in terms, because they are accountable to their own domestic market regulators. So they will come with a different thing. And then you have also the corporate, like people like Godrej, and they are coming with their own brand and code of ethics. So which means now the industry is in a good shape to be able to strongly resist these fly-by-night operators, as Amar was pointing out, to make sure that the development is a noble task, and it is a nation-building task. And therefore, the government should take them seriously, and then should sit down with CREDAI to chart out what should be the right policies for the longer term.
It has to be an exercise which is done in partnership with the government to spread the message of the good work. Now, that brings me to the next topic of discussion here, which is about the trends that the sector is likely to see. I'll begin again with Mr. Panchabagesan. What we've been seeing are back-to-back bad years for this sector. Started with demonetization, then came GST, RERA, then you have the COVID. 2021 was largely supposed to be a year where things will settle down in the sector, but you have a resurgence of COVID. What does that mean for the sector? What are the trends that we should look forward to as far as the sector is concerned?
So I would not put COVID in the same bucket as demonetization and GST, because I think those are structural problems which hurt the industry, because one came as a complete surprise and the other one is a badly implemented structure. The only thing that COVID did, which really hurt the sector, was the labor. The construction and the slowdown and the fact that customers could not come down and see the sites. So I think it slowed down the physical interaction which usually happens in real estate projects. But otherwise, I think the industry is better suited to answer this question. But I would think last year has been one of the good years in terms of the picking up of demand and people actually starting to think of housing as a serious, because no longer you can be cooked up with a lot of people. You wanted some independent space, larger space, because you have to work from home. So I think in many respects, COVID has been a positive to the sector. I would say. But I think in terms of trends, I'm going to again take a little bit, couple of steps back and think of it not just in a COVID time, but much larger, starting with RERA. I think the first thing is the consolidation. I think the consolidation is going to happen no matter whether you like it or not, mainly because the regulatory cost is increasing. So people who are sort of fly by night, they are not going to survive at that cost. And the second one is the customers are going to be very picky. If somebody is not willing to put themselves through RERA, then clearly, it's going to be very hard for customers to buy into those projects. And now, since there is a recourse through RERA, so I think I would say consolidation is a huge trend. The corporatization is another trend, which is sort of just like in other sectors, larger corporate brands are coming in. So definitely it is upping the competitive game in the sector. So larger developers are now getting who is able to create a niche in the marketplace. All of that is going to happen. The third trend, which I think, I don't know, I'd be very curious to hear the industry's take on this, is what has happened in the West is that real estate has got two components. One is the capital component, the other is the construction and the development component. The development component has completely become commoditized in the West. So you could have literally, any larger construction player coming in and developing a product. Let's say even a skyscraper in New York City, nobody would have heard of them. So the entire sector has become largely a capital game, which means whoever has the lowest cost of capital wins the game. And that you can already see, right? For example, the developers who have survived the last 2-3 years of downturn, as you said, are the people who are strongest in their capital, people who are not subject to capital shocks. So in that respect, I feel we are also moving there. It may happen in a few years, maybe 10 years, I don't know. But what's going to happen is that the building itself, development, is going to be commoditized, which means there could be a string of players, no-name players, who can develop it once you give them a plan, right? And entirely the real estate companies will then become large-scale capital raisers, people who are Blackstones of the world, people who are large institutional investors of the world, people who will come in, who will be able to raise money at lower capital, a lower cost, and therefore they will be able to generate quickly. The only hiccup in Indian context is still that local connectivity, access to the government, all of those things, which still is on a relationship basis.
As Mr. Hegde said, that you need to move one file, he has to go to 40 departments.
Correct. So which is why I think you might still have that interface, the human interface element. But my guess is, as the governments also move away to an automated, the single window, automated clearance, and so on, then you are going to see this commoditization.
Yeah, I'll go to Mr. Nagendrappa with the same question. What are the trends that you're likely to see whenever you pick up a report on real estate? You have tens and thousands of trends that are staring at you. So what do you, as a participant in the sector, feel will be the trends going ahead in 2021 and beyond?
See, as Professor Venki said, things have changed, and as earlier also I mentioned, from unorganized to organized, the expectation of the home buyers from the CREDAI developer or generally any developer, they are also very knowledgeable today, especially the home buyers in Bangalore, who are very tech savvy and who do their own data research and all of that, and then they conclude. So going forward, the trend, as rightly said by Venki, it is going to be, consolidate. Anyway, people who have survived for the past 2-3 years are going to be there. And today, amongst the probably 250 plus developers in Bangalore, we have not even seen 10% dip in the CREDAI developers. But as a developer as such, you have seen by and large a reduction in number of developers. So going forward, the entire developer community in India is going to be replaced by the organized developers. So hence the mindset or the mood set or the expectations or the deliverability will be this thing. So, but in the long run, we expect the cost of capital, once when you are moving, the cost of capital to come down, so that, this is passed on, and even certain, the awareness, like earlier, as I said, rules are something which have to be, changed, and awareness among not only from the developer's perspective, even from the home buyer's perspective, they will also start expecting or asking why is certain fees is taken in certain way. Ultimately, everything is going to be passed on to the home buyer only. No developer is going to put from his pocket. So the awareness among all the stakeholders is going to be very, very high, and the transparency is going to be at the highest level. So things are going to be very prospective and bright.
If I can come in, honestly, I think COVID has really upended a lot of businesses, and there's a huge shift, and the importance to tech has increased. More and more developers are beginning to understand and explore the ways they can implement tech in their day-to-day operations, whether it is project monitoring or whether it's customer interfacing software, getting more and more it online as opposed to offline, getting bookings done online, getting more and more technology for AVs to be shown about the project, because honestly there aren't that many walk-ins as before. Obviously things changed post things settling down, but again you still have something brewing in the right now. So more and more focus on AV, getting walkthroughs done for your projects as opposed to customers visiting the site. All of that is happening, and customer centricity will be more and more important going forward. I think that has been an underlying theme all along, but I think it will get re-emphasized more in these times.
One thing you can notice during this period is like earlier to now, the footfall or the visitors to the site are serious home buyers. They are not window shopping people. The conversion rates are high. Okay, so what it means is that, like Amar said or Mysore said, now the level of transparency. We in Bangalore actually we did virtual tour of the sites during the pandemic. Okay, when we had lockdowns or a little after relaxation, we had a lot of site visits conducted virtually. So the technology may play a major role, and technology is going to come in not only in this thing. We were talking about only for creating the inquiries. Even the sales also are going to be dependent on the technology side of it.
Okay, that brings me to the last segment of this conversation, which is about the sustainability trend that we've seen in the sector. So I open up this question to whoever wants to take it first. How do you ensure sustainable realty growth in Bengaluru? Mr. Nagendrappa mentioned a while back about how Bangalore is known for the traffic snarls, which is known for its rapid and unplanned urbanization. How do you plan for environmental upgradation in a city like Bangalore? And how do you balance the two? Sustainability and real estate. Whoever wants to take it first.
I think a lot has to be done by the government. Of course, we are there. We will develop. We will make properties for better quality of life. But then a lot has to be done by the government. You have to have a dedicated department that ties in all the road infrastructure department, the Bangalore Development Authority, the water supply board, the sewage board. Everybody has to speak the same language, and everything has to go in sync. Whether it's the metro corridor, everybody has to talk to each other. I feel that is not happening, and a lot of times we have seen that the development happens first, the real estate development happens first, and infrastructure plays catch up. And that catch up is not like a matter of few months. It's a matter of few years. Sometimes it takes 5 years for that catch up to happen. And by then that city would have grown and the density would have increased. So it's almost like a never ending loop that the government is facing to play a catch up game. And it's never, it's never up to date. But there have been certain pockets like the Aero Park by KIDB, the Industrial Development Board, which did the right way around. They had the infrastructure put in place, the broad roads were done, the power substation was all set up, and then they chopped the lands into small parcels so that developers can participate. I think that's the way to go. Otherwise, it's just going to add to the traffic woes of the city. I know it's hard to do, but I think that something needs to be done and it has to be done now.
I'll come to Mr. Panchapagesan. How do you strike a balance between the two forces? One is environment, the other is the need for the investor and the developer as well as the home buyers to see houses coming about, especially in India where cities are older, much older, and perhaps new urban development plans cannot be put in place.
See, I think the environment is a longer term thing, and I think it will be very hard to enforce it on an industry which is focused on profits. And it is important that it is more of a mindset change. That if you take care of the environment over a longer term, your profits and returns are also assured. And I think it's more a messaging from the government and ensuring certain guardrails are set, rather than forcing it on the developers entirely and saying you need to take care of it no matter whether you make money or not. I think that will not work, which will again create another host of problems down the road. So I think the best, I'm taking a high road here. I think the government's role is to set good policies, establish good guardrails, and then make sure that you enforce people who violate those guardrails in a very stringent manner. And then step out of the way. Let the private sector, let the people figure it out. And I think we are mature enough, both within the real estate sector and within the larger economy, that there are excellent people out there who can take care of the problem, who can deliver in an assured manner. As long as the government is consistent, as Amar pointed out, the policies are clear, consistent, transparent, and there is no retrospective change in the middle and so on. So I think that is something that the government has to do. Otherwise, the next decade is going to be horrendous for all of us.
I'll come to Mr. Hegde with that same point that you raised about retrospective decisions. NGT, a clear case of how environment consciousness can actually wreak havoc, be it for the developer or for the person, for the home buyer. The role of dialogue with government in such a situation.
NGT is a classic example. Just to quote 2 paragraphs of NGT judgment. Which, and the first paragraph it says that the buffer specified by in the comprehensive development plan of 30 meters, whatever, is not based on scientific findings or the study.
It's unscientific.
Next para, very next para. Therefore, this bench says that the buffer should be 75 meters. In one para, the judge has already, sorry, I don't know whether I'm contempt of court or something like that, but the judge has already made his scientific assessment. In one para, he says it has to be 75 meters. Where is the basis?
Now, there also it was a kind of clarity was not provided to the court also by the government officers. Like, the lakes were 50 meters and the primary Raja Kalways were, the lakes were 30 meters and the primary Kalways were 50 meters. So,
I'm not gone to the details. I'm just telling you the overall decision. The judgment itself, according to me, is faulty.
And so I'm asking you, what is the solution out of it? What is the solution?
Solution is this, in the name of judicial activism, the judiciary is stepping into legislature, which is not right. Three arms should do their job.
Right.
The bureaucracy, the politicians, and the jury, they're forgotten. It's all getting intermingled.
Mm-hmm.
If I do my duty properly, like you said, sustainability. Okay, it is very true that Professor and Amar said the policies has to come from the government, from the central government and state government. Yeah, when it comes, I'll definitely follow it. But I should not abuse the system. Where FAR is permissible, FAR is 2.5, I should not put up 3. Where the permissible floor limit is 8, I should not put up 11. I'm overloading the system. Mm-hmm. I should also take care of the system. Mm-hmm. I can't just wait for the government to do everything.
Yeah.
This is what Mr. Hegde. So I think if CREDAI can proactively document, say that CREDAI members don't do this.
Yes, sir.
Right, and I think that's a strong message to the market that CREDAI follows the norms. They don't violate norms, and here is the
communication hasn't been all that good.
As Mr. Panchapagesan was highlighting just a few minutes back, that judicial activism also perhaps stems from a deep distrust. It might not be logical, that distrust, but it has somehow been allowed to fester, and he has the solution, which is communication. You have to communicate, and you yourself have to. Yes. I have one final question. This is a question to all of you who are participants in the real estate sector, which is that for an article that we were recently working on green buildings, what we realized after speaking to most of the companies who provide green buildings is that the demand is not there. Well, the government mandates you as a developer to build certain things in a certain way, get accreditations to become a green building, but the developers are seeing that the demand is not there from home buyers. What are the trends that you are seeing as far as green buildings are concerned?
So whatever product we do, ultimately it is for the end user. The end user has to appreciate, and end user has to recognize, and he has to express his desire to have something like that. But to a larger extent, unfortunately, that awareness is not there in India. Everything is cost-centric. I mean, many a times they don't even look at specification. They don't even look at so many things. I mean, they just say, okay, there I'm getting a 3 BHK for this price. I mean, here this is a higher price. I mean, they do not even look at, like, for example, from CREDAI, I mean, no developer gives you a handbook, like the manual what you get when you buy a car. Now we are also coming out with a manual, like a handbook by CREDAI, where in which every home buyer will get a manual, how to use, what to use, and what not to abuse. Okay, the do's and don'ts. So those kind of, they don't look at actually, but definitely with the time, they will also appreciate and understand and acknowledge the contribution of the environment, or how important it is to have an environment friendly home also, if not to a large 100% extent, I mean, to a larger extent or to a decent extent. So with the time, there will be kind of, today, yes, I mean, as you said, today's scenario, there is not much of, according to me, yeah, that desire is not there. I mean, it is all cost-centric or cost-driven.
Maybe to add there, again, it's a communication issue. That's what I feel, because I should be in a position to communicate to my prospective purchaser, okay, cost-wise, it may be slightly higher or not, But in the long run, there is a benefit in terms of cost also, maintenance cost. In addition to the huge contribution one is directly or indirectly making towards his environment, his planet. It is my planet. So we don't know. We keep abusing it. We've forgotten that we are all tenants here.
Yes.
Yes, it is my planet. It is my planet. And if I don't love it, if I don't forget about doing anything, don't abuse it. Coming to the point of abusing, I just want to add one point, maybe out of context. Look at the way the government does its infrastructure. The cost, I can tell you, cost and repair is much more than the project cost in most of the infrastructure that government put in. They lay a road, next day, a water board comes and digs it. Water board fills it, sewage board comes and digs it. And look at the environment, look at the kind of dust that it produces. Look at the wastage. Look at the how much we abuse, how much we use the scarce product. It is all coming from your Mother Earth. Everything, whether it is a stone or a sand or a soil or anything for that matter, it's come from the same Mother Earth. They're not making another Earth. There is only one Earth. There is only limited space. It has not grown for millions of years. Still we keep on abusing it. Still we keep on. Our greed has no end. So sustainability also has a link to all these things.
Before I wrap up, Mr. Mysore, would you want to weigh in on the topic that we're talking about, green buildings? Because Mahindra Realty has gone on record to say that actually it is the cost is at par with a conventional house that you buy. But they say that you still do not see interest from home buyers. Perhaps there's, as Mr. Hegde pointed out, we do not know it, there's no communication, and there's a perception it will be expensive.
So
nobody
honestly,
will see long-term returns.
Honestly, look, it's part of the marketing spiel, and also at the same time, customers, there are few discerning customers who really understand and they look for such aspects, green building initiatives and water saving initiatives. So some of our projects, we have already implemented water meters. A lot of apartments don't have monitoring on water. So what we said is, look, we got to bring some amount of discipline. So if you pay for it, you would use as much as it should be used. If you don't pay for it, and if it goes under common area maintenance, you may abuse it. There are a few people who could probably abuse it. So that's where we got in. It's almost like a electric meter. It's for water, but it's to your apartment. So you are billed by what you use. So that's bringing some amount of sustainability. We have seen in some communities where the water consumption has dropped by a factor of 1/3. So 33% usage of water has been reduced. So that actually means that water saved can be used for somebody else. And those kind of initiatives, some companies have already started. We've also done it. And also we've seen in large commercial buildings, low emission, low E glass actually really helps in keeping the air conditioning cost low. So we absolutely don't compromise on that. But ultimately, market forces come into play. There are only few tenants who will say, okay, look, my cost of running will be lesser, so I'm willing to pay that delta in higher rent. But again, this is not everybody appreciates, but hopefully the trend will shift from those people who don't appreciate to people who start appreciating, because ultimately, like Mr. Hegde said, we only have one planet to live on.
Right. Well, it has been yes, Mr. Panchapaganesan.
I just want to add one thing, right? I think it is completely unfair to put the onus on the industry and the customers. These sort of mega trends or mega change in behavior can only be initiated through government subsidies. And I'm just going by all the past presidents in globally. Everything starts with government subsidizing for change of behavior. And once the change happens, then the market forces take into account. And then, as you said, right, I mean, then the people will pay a premium for these buildings. So right now, it is completely unsustainable to expect builders to put in those costs, higher cost, and the customers are not willing to pay. I think even though I agree with Mr. Hegde that builders should be cognizant of it, at some point in time, it is not worth it. I mean, no builder is going to take a loss on a continuous basis, hoping for a greener planet. So that's not going to happen, even though how noble the intent is. Similarly, the customers, I mean, they know that they are in for the short term and they're not going to really think about the planet 70 or 100 years from now. So I think if the change in behavior has to happen, very similar to what you see in the auto, right? I mean, if you want to reduce pollution, the government has to be regulated and the government has to subsidize. I think at some point in time, that initial push by the government will change the behavior, and then the market forces can take effect subsequently.
It has been an absolutely exhilarating discussion. We've completely run out of time. So it's a huge thank you from me here to Mr. Nagendrappa, to Mr. Panchapagesan, to Mr. Mysore and Mr. Hegde for taking the time out to have this great discussion. Bottom line of the discussion, that communication perhaps would to go a long way in removing the certain elements of distrust that are still there as far as home buyers are concerned. When it comes to government, the government at the state level as well as at the central level will have to take the first initiative to ensuring that there is policy consistency, and as well as the industry's concerns are taken care of. Policy cannot be made in silos. It has to take care of data and see the long-term effect that one policy has, which cannot be changed every 5 years that you have elections. With those thoughts, thank you once again